Yo, it's Rev. I make music as summer starved. Songwriter, record producer, joyful noise chaser. That's my little motto. Hope you dig it. Today we're going to talk about subtle modulation. This is changes over time and how this can affect a boring pad or maybe something that is just stagnant. This was inspired by a conversation I had on episode 3 of the Renoise podcast. My guest was the very special Jessica Rae Huber, film composer. She's worked on The Walking Dead, on Marvel Agent S.H.I.E.L.D, on Outlander, just to name a few. Check out that episode if you haven't yet. One of the things she described, well, I will let her speak, and then we'll jump into Ableton, and we'll go from there.
So one is a super simple one that I do all the time. If I've got a scene or like a length of time that I've got to keep it interesting, but not a lot is going on. Like in other words, there might be like some cool pads underneath some dialogue, or you don't want to just like play a pad and then just have it stay the same for like 30 seconds and it gets, or a minute, and it gets really boring. So just I like throwing some motion type plugins on that.
Cool.
Another cool trick I like to do, so like sometimes you might have a ramp of volume and even the compositions kind of like ramping up to a certain hit point or a certain moment where like everything drops out. Okay, let's just pretend I've got a scene and I've got like tremolo strings, like a sample going, or even live, right? It's like they're really playing and they're ramping up to this moment and then it cuts off. One thing I like to do is take like any kind of reverb. Like I usually use Verb, but you can do this with any cool reverb. Like sometimes I do this with like the Valhalla Shimmer reverb.
Sure.
So certain reverbs sound kind of wacky, so you can do this with a wacky reverb too. Is as it's ramping up, you start from nothing. So it's like the mix is not even in at all. And then right as the ramp is starting to really get really hot, you quickly automate that volume up on the mix of your reverb.
All right, so we're here in Ableton, and a few things that Jessica talked about. It was subtle modulation, and let's start there. So I have here the analog synth, which comes in Ableton. I'll bring the filter down a little bit. Okay, so that's just like a basic chord. Let me just put that in. And so what I want to do is actually get it to rise a little faster. Slower, I should say. That's great. And I'll take out that envelope there. So one of the things that a lot of synthesizers have to introduce modulation, which is subtle movement over time. We use LFOs for that. LFO stands for not the band, but low frequency oscillator. It's an inaudible tone that you can use to change slow modulation over time. So there's 2 different LFOs on this particular instrument, but what we want to do is add a little bit of subtle movement to the filter. And so you can assign LFO at certain frequencies to influence the filter. So if I go to here, click on filter, there is different modes down here: frequency mod or resonance modulation. So you can kind of subtly add in the LFO. So I'll show you. I'll play it. So as you can hear, the LFO is responding to or influencing the filter. Bring the cutoff down a little bit. So it's a little bit much, right? That's not very subtle. You can kind of dial in the subtlety here. And at higher rates, you can match it to the BPM, so you can hear that. Quarter note, half note. Okay, so basically it is that subtle modulation over time by using an LFO. If you click here, you see pitch modulation, okay? So you can actually have that same LFO influence the pitch. Get it real slow. So you hear that same LFO as, I'll turn off the click. So the rate is affecting both the frequency and the pitch at the same time. You can go real wild. But what we're doing is subtle. Okay. So one way to use an LFO to introduce subtle motion into a pad. So she also talked about this idea of reverb or delay throws to add texture, and I'll just go through that real quick. What I'll do is go ahead and grab this little MIDI bar of the same chord that we had. I click and hold it so I can drag it, and then I hit tab, and I bring it over to this window. Okay, so I'll get rid of that, open this up. So we have that same MIDI track. If I hit tab, I go back over. Same MIDI track that's here is now here. Okay. In the timeline, left to right, in the arrangement view. So what we can do is what she was talking about was basically a reverb throw that once the sound completely cuts off, the reverb continues. Okay. So what I'll do is open up a reverb. Okay, so let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so you can hear after that cut off, it's still, the reverb still had a little bit of a tail to it. Slowly dragging up the dry and wet. So after this stopped, the reverb went into action. Cool. So what we'll do is actually automate some of this for that modulation. So if I just click, the quick key is A. And when I go to A, you'll see that this little menu changed. All right, and you have different types of automation that you can add to your songs, sounds, etc. So here you can actually add different windows. So this is the reverb dry and wet. As you see here, if I click on it, it shows up here. And now you have these little automation lines. So I can kind of drag that to 0, and then I want it to swell all the way to full by the end of that track. So if you watch down here on the reverb, now a little red dot has appeared and you'll see it move over time. Cool. What if I want the decay time to change, modulate? I can click on that. As you see up here, now this changed to decay time. So if I press this little plus button, now I have the modulation window for the dry wet, and now a new modulation window for the decay time. So I can grab it. It's at 4.67 seconds here. But what if I also boosted that to 60 seconds? Now watch, a little red dot popped up. Modulation is now in effect. And then I want it to drop, so I'll grab that. have it drop to 0. So here we go. Modulation. Okay. So you're automating some of that. She also talked about a volume automation. So again, if I click on that, now a new window popped up. It said mixer track volume. So I can control where the volume actually shuts off. So what if I grabbed it there and brought the volume all the way down? So it sounds, we'll get a little swell going. As you can see, this now has a red dot on it. I can actually hit B and this turns into a piano, to a pen tool. It's just like start messing around with the volume. See what that sounds like. Make these little drops here. So by clicking these little dots, you can erase them and kind of cause these little sawtooth type up and down motion with your modulation. Again, subtle changes, or not so subtle, over time. So that is how I would attempt to use subtle modulation, or not so subtle, with LFOs and automation. If you find value, found it useful, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, love me, send me flowers. Keep making noise, y'all. See you next time.